President Lee Jae-myung has now arrived in Egypt for the second stop of his 10-day trip to the Middle East and Africa. He is scheduled to sit down for talks with the Egyptian President El-Sisi and deliver a speech at Cairo University on South Korea's vision in the Middle East. A United Nations committee has adopted a resolution criticizing human rights violations in North Korea by consensus. The resolution, co-sponsored by South Korea and 60 other countries, will be reviewed at next month's General Assembly plenary session for final adoption. South Korean tech stocks opened higher this morning, and the benchmark KOSPI is now back above the 4,000 mark. This comes after U.S. chip giant NVIDIA posted strong revenue and profits that beat market expectations, following comments from its CEO dismissing concerns about an AI bubble. Hello and thanks for joining us on Arirang News. We begin today with President Lee Jae-myung's 10-day trip to the Middle East and Africa. The president has now arrived in Egypt and will be sitting down with his Egyptian counterpart to discuss key cooperation and lay out his Middle East vision at a university speech. Our presidential office correspondent Yoon Jung-min files this report from Cairo.
President Lee Jae-myung has landed in Egypt for a 3-day official visit, the second leg of his four-nation trip to the Middle East and Africa, having wrapped up his trip to the UAE. He will meet the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah El-Sisi on Thursday for talks on cooperation on trade, education, and culture.
Egypt is an important international logistics hub linking Europe, Africa, and the Middle East, and also is our comprehensive cooperative partner.
Seoul and Cairo celebrate 3 decades of their diplomatic ties this year. The South Korean leader will also deliver a speech at Cairo University on the country's vision in the Middle East before heading to South Africa for the G20 summit. He will then depart for Turkey, the final leg of his 10-day-long trip, for talks with its President Recep Tayyip Erdogan before heading home next week. The president's trip to Egypt signals the start of fully fledged diplomacy with the Middle East region, say top office officials, with the aim of expanding Korea's diplomatic horizon. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News, Cairo.
And thus, President Lee Jae-myung visits Egypt on Thursday and meets with President El-Sisi. Egypt's top diplomat told Arirang News that both leaders are ready to cooperate on real tangible outcomes. Our Oh Soo-young sat down with him.
Seoul and Cairo are embarking on a new phase of strategic partnership with room for collaboration on infrastructure, AI and culture. That's according to Khaled Abdel Rahman, who is Egyptian ambassador to Seoul since 2022.
We are celebrating 30 years of diplomatic relations this year. It's an important visit after a phone call between the two leaders of the countries, and they have agreed on the main topics of cooperation. The political will for both leaders are very strong, very visible, and I think they will be transformed into tangible, real projects that benefit both Egypt and Korea.
A major pillar of this cooperation could be energy and industrial technology. Korean companies are expanding across Egypt's manufacturing, renewable energy and power plant sectors. Last year, SK Ecoplant signed a $1.9 billion renewable energy development project. Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power won a contract to supply components for Egypt's first nuclear power plant in Al-Daba.
So definitely there is room for collaboration between Egyptian and Korean companies, and the expertise and know-how here is very important because we see the partnership between our two countries as a springboard for Africa. So we can use that collaboration to enter into other African markets concerning green energy and renewables.
Egypt is a regional trade hub with its Suez Canal, the Suez Canal Economic Zone, and free trade agreements with Europe, Africa, and the Arab world. Especially at a time of fractured supply chains, the ambassador says the two countries are genuine partners.
So from that, you can export and you can benefit from the low tariff rates and the reduction of time to travel to the destination where you want to sell your goods. So this is also, I mean, you can take a flight from Egypt to many European destinations within 3-4 hours. So air transport is also possible, not only by sea. So also Egyptian airports are now open for public and private partnership, and especially the private sector. And I'm hearing good news that one of the Korean companies might be managing one of our airports that are open for foreign investors.
The ambassador suggested that joint production in Egypt is the next step for a win-win partnership.
We are presenting Egypt as a regional partner for Korea to work in other countries in the region. And I must say here, for the rehabilitation, reconstruction in Gaza, this is a very good opportunity for collaboration of Korean companies, Egyptian companies, to work to rebuild the lives of the Palestinian people. And also we are building new cities, smart cities. And I think this is the strong point with Korea, with AI, and His Excellency President Lee has allocated a very big budget for the AI. And we would like to be partners in that and to really build new cities that can cater for the needs of the next generation.
Cultural exchange is also expanding, especially as Egypt has opened the largest museum in the world dedicated to a single civilization, housing over 100,000 artifacts, showing how ancient Egypt contributed to the world, from prehistory to the Greek and Roman periods.
This shows that Egypt is part of the international community, and this is what we are trying to say to the world, that peace is important, culture is important, and we have to know our history and our roots. And being the oldest country in the world, we are inviting all Koreans to come and to share the modern Egypt now, because this museum is a modern building, hosting an ancient civilization.
And as he reflects on his 4 years in Seoul, the ambassador says the human connection between Egyptians and Koreans, especially youth, is what will stay with him most.
One of my most satisfiable moments was when I was seeing Egyptian and Korean people engaging together, be it in commercial activities or in culture or in art or even in sports, So this experience has really enriched my diplomatic career, which has been going on for the past 34 years.
As the ambassador's lasting legacy, direct flights between Seoul and Cairo will launch next year. He says he hopes people-to-people exchanges will continue to grow as the two countries broaden their cooperation. Oh-seong, Arirang News.
Over in the United States, President Donald Trump has once again stressed that foreign workers are needed to train American workers. He referenced the recent immigration raid in Georgia, where more than 300 Koreans were detained by immigration authorities, noting that he had told officials at the time to stop the enforcement action. Our Isinza explains more.
U.S. President Donald Trump is once again underscoring the need for skilled foreign workers to support American industry, even as some of his right-wing supporters continue to oppose the idea of foreigners taking American jobs. Speaking at the U.S.-Saudi Arabia Investment Forum on Wednesday, Trump argued that foreign specialists are essential for training American workers and keeping major investment projects on track.
But if you have to bring people to get those plants opened, we want you to do that, and we want those people to teach our people how to make computer chips and how to make other things.
Trump also referenced the high-profile immigration raid in September at a Korean battery factory construction site in Georgia. More than 300 Korean workers were detained during that operation, raising concerns among investors about whether the U.S. could still be considered a reliable destination for large-scale manufacturing projects. Trump said the raid interrupted a billion-dollar project involving highly complex and hazardous battery production techniques. He added that the workers involved were essential for launching the facility and transferring advanced manufacturing skills. The U.S. leader described telling officials at the time to stop the enforcement action, adding that the crisis was resolved and that Korean engineers are now training American workers to run the plant. Meanwhile, Reuters is reporting that the Trump administration may delay the sweeping semiconductor tariffs that the president has repeatedly announced over the past several months. According to sources familiar with internal discussions, U.S. officials have quietly informed both government and private sector stakeholders that the tariffs may not be imposed in the near future. Trump originally declared in August that the United States would levy tariffs of approximately 100% on all imported semiconductors and integrated circuits, while exempting companies building or planning to build chip-making plants on American soil. Reuters notes that geopolitical and economic factors appear to be driving the hesitation. Analysts warn that implementing high semiconductor tariffs could reignite tensions in the U.S.-China trade relationship, potentially provoking China to revive its rare earth export controls. 이 승재, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the UN General Assembly's committee adopted a resolution condemning North Korea's human rights violations. South Korea joined as co-sponsor, but one expert says this could change next year. Our correspondent Kim Bo-kyung tells us more.
The UN General Assembly's third committee has adopted a North Korean human rights resolution for the 21st consecutive year. Co-sponsored by South Korea and 60 other countries, the resolution condemning the regime's human rights violations was adopted by consensus on Wednesday local time without a vote, and then was forwarded to the General Assembly plenary session. The latest resolution expressed deep concern about the grave human rights violations by the regime and the lack of accountability for human rights violations and abuses. It also condemned the reclusive state for diverting excessive resources to military expenditure and its illegal nuclear weapons and ballistic missile programs rather than securing welfare. South Korea was one of the first 41 member states supporting the draft resolution, though there had been speculation that the liberal government led by President Lee Jae-myung might not join, as it aims to push for dialogue with Pyongyang. South Korea continued to co-sponsor the resolution from 2008 to 2018, but under the Moon Jae-in administration between 2019 and 2022, it withdrew, citing concerns about the impact on inter-Korean relations. Seoul rejoined in 2023 under the previous Yoon Suk-yeol administration. One expert says though Seoul maintained its position to back the resolution, this could change next year.
The government has been sending conciliatory messages to North Korea, hoping for a summit with Kim Jong-un or some form of exchange and cooperation. But the issue North Korea reacts most sensitively to is the UN resolution on human rights. Since this goes against the direction of the government's current policy, there's a high chance that they may not take part next year.
The expert added that this year is the first year of the administration, and sorting out its stance regarding North Korea's human rights could have come a bit too early. But there is a chance South Korea could withdraw from backing the resolution next year. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
On the economic front, South Korea's benchmark KOSPI surged past 4,000 on Thursday, jumping over 2% upon opening, mainly led by tech stocks. This comes after the world's largest chip maker, NVIDIA, reported earnings higher that beat estimates, shrugging off concerns about an AI bubble. The U.S. chip giant reported a record $57 billion in quarterly revenue, exceeding estimates by nearly $2 billion, and forecast even stronger growth ahead. As of 11:30 a.m., shares in South Korea's tech giants Samsung Electronics and SK hynix are up 4.5% and 4% respectively from Wednesday's close. In other news, tensions between China and Japan continue to escalate in one of worst bilateral disputes in years, following the Japanese Prime Minister's comments about Taiwan. The Chinese government has already warned its citizens against traveling to Japan and is now planning to ban all seafood imports from Japan. Our Cha Yun-kyung explains more.
China told Japan on Wednesday that it will suspend all imports of Japanese seafood in a move that signals their diplomatic dispute and economic retaliation have expanded. Beijing partially eased the restrictions on Japanese seafood almost 2 years after they had been imposed due to Tokyo's decision to release treated wastewater from its Fukushima nuclear power plant in 2023. However, China reimposed the ban this month, saying it was due to the need for further monitoring of the water release. At a briefing this month, the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs announced it would strengthen management and supervision of Japanese seafood imports, saying that it would immediately impose restrictions in accordance with the law if any risk factors were detected.
The Japanese side has failed to provide the technical materials that were promised. I would also like to emphasize that the recent wrongful remarks made by Japanese Prime Minister, even if Japanese aquatic products were to be exported to China, there would be no market for them.
Relations between the two countries soured recently after Prime Minister Takaichi Sanae publicly linked a Taiwan Strait crisis with the possible deployment of Japanese troops. China then urged its citizens not to study or travel to Japan after her statement, resulting in mass cancellations that could deal a sizable blow to Japan's economy. Moreover, Japanese officials fear Beijing could escalate tensions by tightening exports of rare earth elements. China controls more than 90% of the global refining capacity for these. As China has banned the screenings of upcoming Japanese films, there is also growing concern that Beijing could use trade as a weapon, as it has done in the past during disputes with other countries. 차윤경, Arirang News.
And here in South Korea, all 267 passengers and crew aboard a ferry were safely rescued after the vessel ran aground off the country's southwestern coast on Wednesday. Everyone on board the Queen Genovia II was transferred safely to a nearby port using Coast Guard and support vessels. The Coast Guard deployed 17 patrol ships, 4 coastal rescue vessels, a plane, and special rescue personnel as part of the operation. Authorities said Thursday that investigators are now focusing on possible navigation errors. The ferry struck on an uninhabited islet called Chok near Changsan Island at about 8:17 p.m. The ship was traveling from Jeju Island to the port city of Mokpo.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. In Ukraine, at least 26 people were killed in an attack on the western city of Ternopil after Russia launched a large-scale barrage of drones and missiles across the country on Wednesday. Ukrainian officials say at least 3 children were among the dead, while 100 people were injured as 2 residential buildings in the city were struck in the attack. Authorities placed all of Ukraine under air raid alerts as explosions were reported in Ternopil and Lviv. The Energy Ministry reported emergency power outages in several regions. President Vladimir Zelensky, who was in Turkey for talks on ending the war, said Russia used more than 470 drones and 48 missiles in the assault and called for stronger air defense support from allies. The strike comes as Ukraine warned that Moscow has intensified daily attacks on civilian and energy infrastructure ahead of winter. The United Kingdom says that within the last few weeks, what it describes as Russian spy ship has used lasers to disrupt military pilots tracking its movements near UK waters. The UK says any interference with British pilots poses a direct security risk. Britain's Defense Secretary John Healey called the action, quote, deeply dangerous. He said the Royal Navy and RAF Poseidon aircraft were following the ship closely and warned that the UK has military options ready should the Yantar change course. The Yantar is part of Russia's Deep Sea Research Unit, which is suspected of underwater surveillance. The Russian embassy denies threatening UK interests. In New York, a Gustav Klimt portrait set a new record for modern art after being sold at Sotheby's for $236.4 million. The work, Portrait of Elizabeth Lauder, painted between 1914 and 1916, once helped its Jewish subjects survive during the Holocaust. Lauder used the artwork to support her claim that Klimt, who was not Jewish, was her father, allowing her to avoid capture by the Nazis. Sotheby's did not identify the buyer. The portrait came from the collection of Leonard A. Lauder, who died this year. In total, 5 Klimt pieces from his collection have sold for $392 million. Chu Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
After a very intense cold snap, temperatures are finally climbing back up today, meaning the season is returning to where it should be. The morning commute was much more bearable, and afternoon highs will also be in the mid-teens. Meanwhile, the East Coast region still remains under dry weather advisory, and this is particularly dangerous today and tomorrow because strong winds gusting up to 15 to 20 meters per second will hit this area. The combination of dry conditions and strong winds make it easy for fire to break out and spread, so please exercise extreme caution with fire safety. And this afternoon, Seoul gets up to 14 degrees Celsius. Daejeon, Gwangju, Daegu will make it to 15 degrees under sunny skies in northern parts of Korea. Meanwhile, the air quality will be decent nationwide. Clear weather will persist through the weekend. Rain is forecast to return next Monday across the western regions, which will bring another cold snap, but it's not going to be as bad as we've just said.
That's all we have for today's noon edition of Arirang News. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Stay tuned.